What happens when a simple flight turns into a public spectacle for Barron Trump? A routine trip entwined into chaos. But no Bone anticipated the storm that followed. When Melania arrived, the loudspeaker crepitated as a final boarding call echoed through the bustling outstation of Dallas Love Field Airport. Barron Trump sat near gate C-12, his altitudinous frame folded into a president that sounded too small for his elevation. He kept his head down, scrolling through his phone, trying to blend into the crowd of trippers rushing to make their breakouts. At 17, his life was anything but ordinary. Yet he learned the art of staying under the radar. In public, but moment that trouble was about to be tested. A gate agent, an aged man with sharp features and an air of desirousness, approached the area. His eyes landed on Barron, who was in the president's boarding section. Commodity about the teenager's frosty address sounded to rub him the wrong way. The agent's voice cut through the ambient noise. "Excuse me, youthful man," he said, his tone laced with dubitation. "Are you sure you are in the right boarding group?" Barron looked up, startled but calm. "Yes, I am. I've a first-class ticket." His voice was steady but polite, his parenting shining through. The agent scanned him for a moment, his aspect fluttering to Barron's phone, his casual hoodie and lurkers. "Can I see your ticket?" Barron dithered. It was not the first time he would been singled out, for no apparent reason. But commodity about this man's tone felt different, more aggressive. He handed over his boarding pass, his name easily displayed on the screen. Barron Trump. The agent read audibly. Breaking, his expression shifted, but rather of backing off. His address hardened. "Stay then." Passengers around them began to take notice, their whispers a low hum of curiosity. Barron felt the heat rise in his cheeks, but he kept his expression neutral. Moments laterly, the agent returned, joined by an administrator. "There seems to be an issue with your ticket," the agent said forcefully. "You'll need to step away while we sort this out." Barron lowered. "What issue?" "I reserved this ticket weeks ago," the administrator cut, "and we are handling it. Joe, please step down from the gate." As Barron reluctantly moved away, he could feel the gapes of fellow passengers. Some pulled out their phones, recording the commerce. The murmurs grew louder, his frustration coddled, but he smelled his lingo, unintentional to make a scene. But the situation was not about to downsize. It was just getting started. Barron leaned against a near column, watching the other passengers board without issue. The ganders from the gate staff and murmurs from the crowd felt heavier. With each passing second, he shifted his weight from one bottom to the other, doubtful of what was taking so long. Was this about his last name? Or was it commodity differently entirely? He was not the type to jump to conclusions, but this was starting to feel particular. After several twinkles, the administrator returned, his expression still stern. "We're unfit to corroborate your identity through the system. Do you have another form of identification?" Barron furrowed his brow. "My passport is in my carry-on bag." "You did not indeed check it," the administrator dithered, easily caught off guard by the logical response, but rather of backing down. He doubled down. "Joe, this is not just about ID. There are procedures. We need to follow procedures." Barron asked, his tone calm but pigmented with unbelief. "What procedures?" "I have flown through this field dozens of times, without an issue," the gate agent from earlier fitted. "We've had some irregularities recently. You're not being singled out." But the look in his eyes betrayed him. Barron was not buying it, and neither were many passengers near, who began murmuring among themselves. A woman in her late 40s, holding a toddler on her hipsterism, spoke up. "What's the problem? He is just a sprat with a ticket. Let him board." The administrator ignored her, fastening rather on Barron. "You'll need to stay then, while we conduct a farther review. If you do not misbehave, we'll have to escalate the matter." "Escalate?" Barron echoed, his tolerance wearing thin. "What exactly are you raising?" "I have done nothing wrong." As if on cue, a brace of field security officers appeared. Barron's casket tensed, not from fear, but from sheer unbelief at how snappily the situation was twisting. The officers stood on either side of him, their presence drawing indeed further attention. Phones were out now, recording every alternate. "Joe, please come with us," one officer said in a measured tone. "We just need to ask you many questions." Barron exhaled, his jaw tensing as he seized his carry-on bag. Forfeiture. He followed them into a small, sterile room near the gate, the whispers and camera flashes following him like a storm pall. Inside, the officers asked him to sit at a table. The air felt colder, heavier, as one officer began flipping through his passport. "This is ridiculous," Barron murmured under his breath. Shaking his head, one of the officers looked up. "We're just following protocol, son." But that word protocol was starting to sound like in reason for commodity more minatory. And the more they probed, the further Barron began to feel the weight of an implied bias in the room. But what Barron did not know was that someone differently was formally on her way. And she was not happy in the back seat of a black SUV. Weaving through Dallas business, Melania Trump sat poised, her phone in hand. She had planned a quick trip to surprise her son at the field after his flight, but as her phone buzzed with a flood tide of textbook dispatches and social media cautions, her expression shifted from calm to concern. One communication caught her attention. "Commodities going on with Barron at the field. People are posting vids." Her fritters flew across the screen, pulling up a short clip that showed Barron girdled by security, being LED down from the gate. She replayed it doubly, her brow furrowing deeper with each pass. "Motorist, please accelerate," she said, her voice cool but firm. Meanwhile, back at the field, Barron sat in the small room, gaping at the blank wall in front of him. The officers had stepped out to corroborate his credentials, leaving him alone to stew in silence. He did not know who to call or what to do. His hands rested on the table, fritters tapping smoothly, a meter he did not indeed realize he was making. Suddenly the door opened, and the administrator from earlier walked in. "We're still working on clearing up the situation," he said, avoiding eye contact. "It should not be much longer." "How much longer?" Barron asked, his tone sharp. "You've had all my information for nearly an hour." The administrator dithered, also grunted commodity about procedures again. Ahead, retreating, Barron exhaled in frustration, running a hand through his hair. This was not just about a ticket or ID presently. It felt like commodity deeper. Outside the terminal, Melania's SUV pulled up to the check. She stepped out, her posture commanding despite her understated outfit. Heads turned as she paraded through the field, her heels clicking against the polished bottom. She did not need to advertise her presence. People simply moved away as she passed. Approaching the gate where the incident had passed, she was met with a flurry of murmurs and whispers. Passengers honored her incontinently, and some indeed refocused toward the area where security had taken Barron. "Excuse me," she said to a near airline hand. "Where is my son?" The hand blinked, stupefied by the honesty of her question. Let me check." Melania did not stay for a response. She moved forward, her eyes surveying for any sign of Barron. When she spotted the room where he was being held, her pace quickened. She reached the door just as the two officers returned to Barron. They sat when they saw her, their expressions a blend of surprise and apprehension. "What is going on then?" she asked, her voice calm, but carrying a weight that demanded an answer. "Help me, Trump." One officer began fumbling for words. "This is just a standard protocol." "Protocol?" She intruded, her aspect. "I see you're holding my son in a small room with no explanation. What kind of protocol is this?" The administrator appeared behind her, his face pale. "Help me, Trump. This is all just a misreading. We were trying to corroborate his ticket." "A misreading?" Her voice remained steady, but her tone stoned. "Do you treat all passengers this way? Or just the bones you decide to single out?" The room fell silent, the pressure so thick it felt like time itself had stopped. But this silence wouldn't last for long. Melania was about to demand answers. They could not give. Melania's aspect did not waver as she stood in the doorway, her presence commanding the room. Barron glanced at his mama, his relief visible but subdued. He uncurled in his president. His shoulders no longer drooped. "Mrs. Trump," the administrator stammered, globules of sweat forming on his brow. "Please understand. We were just trying to ensure everything was in order." "This is not in order." Melania intruded, her tone as sharp as the silence in the room. "You had his ticket, his passport, and his name. What differently do you need?" a written assignation to board the airplane. The administrator squinched but tried to recover. We flagged his name in the system, and that needed fresh checks. Melania lifted her head slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. Flagged because he is my son, or because someone decided he did not belong in first-class moment. The officers changed uneasy ganders, neither wanting to be the one to respond. The pressure was palpable, and everyone in the room felt it. Eventually one of the officers cleared his throat. "It's standard procedure, ma'am. We were not apprehensive of his relation to you until just now." Melania's eyes narrowed. "So this is about his last name." The administrator opened his mouth to protest, but she raised a hand to stop him. "Save your defenses. I want to speak to someone in charge now." The man dithered but ultimately jounced, stepping out of the room to make a call. Melania turned her attention to Barron, her expression softening as she approached him. "Are you okay?" she asked, still placing a hand on his shoulder. Barron jounced, his voice steady but pigmented with frustration. "Yeah, I am fine. They've just been wasting my time." Melania gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze, before turning back to the officers. "Let me make commodity clear," she said, her voice steady and composed. "You have lowered my son in front of dozens of people. This isn't about protocol or procedures. This is about respect or the lack of it." One of the officers shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Trump will make this right. We'll ensure he boards the coming flight. You suppose this is about getting on a flight?" She cut in, her voice rising slightly, for the first time. "This is about responsibility. I do not want justifications rumored behind unrestricted doors. I want them where they belong, out there where this all started." The administrator returned, now accompanied by a higher-ranking field functionary. The sanctioned extended a hand, which Melania pointedly ignored. "I understand there has been a misreading," he began. "I assure you, we'll be reviewing this incident and taking applicable action." "Applicable action," Melania echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Does that include addressing the staff who escalated this without cause, or reviewing the footage that shows exactly how this began?" The sanctioned blanched. "We can clearly pull up the footage." "Do it," she said forcefully, "and do it now." The room sounded to shrink, as everyone awaited for the functionary to act. Many moments laterly, the administrator returned with a laptop. The course footage showed Barron at the gate, sitting still, a head being approached by the gate agent. It captured the entire exchange, from the gratuitous questioning to the raising pressure, that LED to Barron being removed. Melania watched the footage in silence, her face undecipherable. When it ended, she turned to the administrator. "You owe my son a public reason." "Of course," the man stammered. "We'll address it right down." But Melania was not done yet. This was not just about a reason. It was about transferring a communication that no bone should endure similar treatment, anyhow of their name or status. The administrator, now visibly shaken, LED the way back to the boarding gate. Melania walked beside him, her stride measured and unyielding, with Barron following near behind. The pressure in the outstation was nearly palpable. Passengers who had witnessed the before commotion were still moping their curiosity, piqued by the unforeseen return of the teenager and his mama. As they reached the gate, the administrator stepped forward, cleared his throat, and addressed the crowd. His voice wavered slightly, but he pressed on. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a moment to apologize for a situation that passed before a moment. A misreading involving one of our passengers, Mr. Barron Trump. LED to conduct that were gratuitous and unhappy." A murmur gurgled through the crowd, with some passengers swapping aesthetics of surprise, and others seesawing in agreement. The administrator glanced at Melania, whose steady aspect prompted him to continue. "I want to make it clear," he said, his voice indurate up, "that this youthful man did nothing wrong. The incident was entirely due to an error on our part, and for that we deeply lament the vexation and discomfort caused." Barron stood still, his hands in his pockets, his expression neutral, but inside he felt the weight of the moment, not just for himself but for everyone who had ever been made to feel small in a public setting. Melania stepped forward, her presence drawing the attention of every person in the gate area. "Thank you for your words," she began, her tone measured but bent. "But words aren't enough. This isn't just about my son. It is about the principle of treating every existent with respect and quality, anyhow of who they are or where they come from." The room fell silent, her words cutting through the air like a blade. "My son may carry a name that draws attention, but he's also a person, a youthful man who deserves to be treated fairly, as should every passenger in this field. Let this be a memorial to all of us, to pause and suppose before we act, to flash back that respect is earned by status, but by the humanity we all partake." The crowd erupted in applause, some passengers indeed standing in solidarity. The administrator lowered his head, his face red with embarrassment. For a moment the field buzzed with a newfound energy, not of judgment or division, but of consinity. As the applause subsided, a woman with a toddler approached Barron and Melania. "I just wanted to say, I am sorry for what you went through," she said vocally. It was not right. Melania smiled courteously, her eyes warm. "Thank you. That means a lot," Barron jounced, thankful but still recycling the whirlwind of events. But this moment of clarity was not the end. It was the morning of a discussion about respect, equality, and responsibility that would reverberate far beyond the walls of this terminal. As the gate area began to settle, Barron and Melania were attended to the Chesterfield, while staying for the coming flight. The airline staff, now walking on eggshells, went out of their way to ensure their comfort. Offers of refreshments and precedence boarding were made, but Melania gestured them off politely. For her, this was not about compensation. It was about the principle. Barron sat across from her, his hands clasped in his stage. I did not anticipate all that he said, still breaking the silence. Melania looked up from her phone, her expression softening. "You handled yourself well," she replied. "It's not easy to stay calm in moments like that." Barron signed. "I have dealt with stuff like this before, just not so public." Melania leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "And that is exactly the problem," she said. "No bone should have to get used to being treated unfairly, whether it's you, me, or someone no bone recognizes. Respect should no way depend on a last name or appearance." Barron jounced his mama's words sinking in. "You suppose they'll actually change anything after this?" She listed her head courteously. "Perhaps not moment, but moments like these add up. People notice, and occasionally, each it takes is one person standing up to make others suppose doubly before they act." As they awaited, Melania pulled out her phone and began codifying. Moments latterly, a tweet appeared on her profile. "Moment my son endured commodity. No bone should have to endure being judged before being understood. This serves as a memorial to treat everyone with quality, no matter their name or background. Respect is universal. Let's do better." The post snappily gained traction, sparking conversations online about bias, responsibility, and respect in public spaces. Barron scrolled through the replies, some probative, others critical, but at most echoing the sentiment that fairness and quality should be non-negotiable. When it was eventually time to board the flight, Barron and Melania walked to the gate together. The staff, now noticeably further accommodating, guided them through without issue. As they settled into their seats, Melania glanced at her son, who had formerly put on his headphones. Gaping out the window, she smiled noiselessly, allowing about the bigger picture. This was not just about Barron. It was about every person who had ever been made to feel small, dismissed, or unworthy. Moments like these were openings to educate, to push for change, and to remind the world that respect was an honor, but a right. As the airplane dragged down the runway, Melania closed her eyes, her mind replaying the day's events. It had not been an easy experience, but it was one she hoped would leave a continuing impact, not just on those involved, but on everyone who heard the story. Because occasionally the most important assignments come from moments of adversity, and the way we respond can inspire others to rise above prejudice and embrace kindness. If this story reverberated with you, share it with someone who might need a memorial about the significance of respect and fairness. Let's make a difference together, one discussion at a time. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for further stories that inspire reflection and change.